Welcome to today's podcast, Global Citizen Life. Today we have Anthony Parent on the show. And Anthony, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sally. So happy to be here.
So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and how you got on the path to entrepreneurship and what you're doing right now?
Oh, okay. I run a podcast myself, IRS Medic on
Mhm.
YouTube, and I got onto that one day because I turned on the camera and started talking, and that was a few years ago, and it's I have a lot of fun doing it, and really the topic that we talk about and sort of how this evolved is my dad and I went to law school together. We graduated together. We'd started doing real estate law closings. The market was, I had a feeling the market was going to not do so great. And I got into tax in 2006. And then I felt pretty vindicated in 2007. And then and it was funny. We were doing a lot of tax resolution work back then. And I remember I had a few attorneys who were doing a huge amount of closings before the boom. And so I was like, wow, I think I made the right move getting out of real estate and more into tax. So we're doing resolution, but in 2009, that's when I got a call from my staff. There's a guy at the office here. He has $7 million in an undisclosed Swiss bank account. Is this something we could help with? I'm like, well, yes, obviously. Sure.
Yeah.
So he came in and, talked to him, and we learned together about this form called the FBAR. And I'm looking, I was like, this has a 50% penalty. I'm looking, he's like, yeah, what are we gonna do
Oh,
about this? And so together, he knew I didn't know anything about it. But we figured out, there was a whole offshore volunteer disclosure program with the IRS. And then in his case, as I was going through it, I was one of the first cases where the IRS ran into the foreign mutual funds. And so this was an issue where they didn't have any guidance on this. And their examiners didn't know what to do because these PFICs, as they call them, were so complicated. The IRS had to come up with a way to do it. And so I was, going through and so I was really learning a lot. And there were some IRS employees who, I learned a lot with. We really
mhm.
helped develop it. And then it just struck me that the government didn't know what it was doing. And really they didn't know that
Right, right.
what they thought was
Mm,
going
mm,
on, and then what the reality was. Whoa, the government was assuming that there was all this money just stashed overseas with no rhyme or reason. It was just free money. What they
right.
found out was, oh no, people actually had legitimate things overseas. And
Yeah.
for financial products that the US tax system didn't know how to deal with because there's no analog. So
Mm,
the US has this global jurisdiction of which it's completely unfamiliar with because it doesn't know what it is. And then you find the difficulty and the challenge of trying to fit, square things into round holes and vice versa. And then, using your creativity sometimes to find the way that it fits the best. Um,
right.
and so through that, that's how I got introduced to the whole expat, the expats, because, hey, look, in 2010, 11, there wasn't this easier streamlined program out there. So people are calling, I'm going to jail and they're going to take all my money. And we definitely were more aggressive than other firms and sort of pushing back on the IRS. Um, my dad and I, we always did pretty well with the IRS. We kind of understood them. My dad was a lifelong government bureaucrat, so he had a way with
Okay.
them.
Right.
And his way is so disarming because he comes off as goofy, in fact, but he's so
Very
efficient.
smart. Very smart. Mhm.
He was so likable, so I always felt like we always had a good chance. And when we did, we pushed back pretty hard, and we were aggressive in making sure those penalties were as low as possible.
Mhm.
And so just sort of that whole discovery of this incredibly abusive thing. And it's sort of this thing, like, because you love being overseas, right? And
Love
it's
it.
a great
Yeah.
opportunity, right? It's
So much opportunity.
so much opportunity. And my life is always about how terrible it is because I'm seeing the horrible things. And so oftentimes I will speak with maybe a little bit of a jaundiced eye just because I see it
Mhm.
going wrong. But there's nothing that can't be done correctly, and I think and
Right.
you know that. So
And,
just
like, everything can be fixed, and part of it you're seeing, I mean, you're seeing too, as changes were being implemented, and people just thought, "Well, if I live overseas, if I'm gone, I'm not in the US, then I don't have to worry about taxes." But the US is very different. Like, I'm
very
from Canada, so once I become a non-resident, I don't have to worry about filing an FBAR or my tax return or things like that, because we don't have to as Canadians, but things are very different for Americans. So just explain for to some people what that FBAR is, because they may have been gone and they just think I don't have to file, but there's still paperwork that has to be filed even when you're not a resident anymore.
So the F-bar. The F-bar is, I know the history very well, and I have probably 100 videos on the F-bar. So I'll give you some interesting facts, and I'll go to try to get
Okay.
through it. So it was passed in 1970, and
Mm.
it stands for Report of Foreign Bank Account. So as you can see,
Mm.
the acronym doesn't even match up. So that's the first thing. It's like you couldn't even get that right. You couldn't even get that right, and that's kind of like that. So just to
Yeah.
understand, everything about it is wrong, and really, that's what I've discovered. Every single thing about it is wrong. It was passed in 1970 as part of the Bank Secrecy Act, and it was then it was said it was $10,000, and
Mhm.
that amount has not been changed for inflation. So
Which is
there's okay,
crazy.
there's something wrong with it. Now, this is what happened that allegedly the claim is law enforcement said we needed another tool to go after the worst of the worst. And it's really difficult for us to have trials. So can you help us out and give us something that doesn't, not so messy? And so, what we'd really appreciate is if we place an affirmative duty on everybody who has a foreign bank account of which they have signatory control or a beneficial interest in, if we mandate them to report that to us. And if they don't, it will allow us to assess penalties up to 50% of account value per year, multiple years. So actually being able to give someone a penalty bill higher than what the account made. Few things about the FBAR. It has nothing to do with your taxes. It's not a tax form. It's actually not, but it gets confusing. It gets
Mm.
confusing because the people in charge of the form, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is a subsection of the US Treasury, thinks it's so useless and it's such a stupid form, they wanted nothing to do with it. Like, well, these forms are nothing. They're just people doing things right. And we don't want to administer this. So FinCEN said, hey, you got that agency, down the street there. And they're really good at, processing a lot of forms. So can we put the IRS in charge of processing? And this is it. This is the thing.
Mhm.
And this is like, here's another thing that's wrong with it. We're going to have the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, process and administer what is known as a criminal form. If you look at it, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN Form 114, it's a criminal form that we are allowing our civil division of our tax system to assess the penalties upon and enforce. And it's not a tax form.
But it's not a
So
tax
there's
form.
more wrong with it. Now, over the years, the FBAR was basically a speed limit everybody ignored. It was there, but it wasn't a thing. No one thought of it as an enforcement tool, and there's actually pretty good reasons why you do it. If you look at now, this is where the IRS gets people. This is where they try to get people, and there's ways around it. It's not really true. They'll say this: hey, look, on Schedule B of your return, it's going to ask if you own any bank accounts over $10,000, and it'll inform you to go to the FBAR. And say so it's down there, and people don't check that. They're like, you were willful. That's not true. If you did that, it's not fatal at all. But if you look at that, you're like, oh, okay, go here, go to this FBAR form, see if it's filed. You go to the instructions, and then you'll be pointed to the regulations. The regulations will say yes. Every year, you have to report your existence of your foreign bank accounts to the U.S. Treasury on this form, FBAR form. The source for this is 31 USC 5314. That's the section of the code where the Bank Secrecy Act is. So a lot of ways that people find out they didn't file an FBAR is that if they look at part 3 of their Schedule B, where you report your dividends and interest, you'll see a little box there that says, do you have a signature authority over an interest in a foreign bank account? And then it will send you to the instructions to learn more. And then those instructions will reference IRS regulations. And those IRS regulations will say the authority for the filing of the FBAR comes from 315314. If you look now, if you go to look at that's 31 USC code, the United States code, that's where you find the law that says this is where the FBAR authorization comes from. But the title of the law doesn't say report of foreign bank accounts. It says report of foreign agent transactions. And when you go through and so the first assumption I had was like, oh, well, that's what they mean by bank account. Your agent's a bank account. But when you look at the definitions in the law, you see something. They define what an agent is, and an agent is defined as a person, a human being, a person. And they define what a bank is, and a bank is defined as an institution. And because an institution can't be a person can't be an institution, they are two separate things. And so when you say report a foreign bank account, what it actually requires is that you report your foreign agents, people around the world who are doing things for you. And that's actually what it's for. And so, and it's this crazy thing because people's entire lives are being ruined over this penalty. And even the Supreme Court looked at the FBAR very recently, and the Supreme Court didn't seem to be able to read the statute either, because it doesn't say that. It's very plain, and the definitions make it so. But yet we're living in a world where, like, how do you give advice when the law is this and then what's done is different? And that's what makes it tricky. And that's what I see. But for the most part, I guess I am seeing the worst examples. So I am going to tell you the worst things that are happening, and that's where I think I know, how best to avoid them. I know what how the IRS works. I know how they work, and I know their limitations. And you want to take advantage of those. There's certain things they're going to go after if it's easy. If it's easy, they can do it. If it's hard to understand,
they're less likely to do it. It has to be really worth their time.
Yeah,
exactly. And how I started and got into looking more into moving my corporation internationally was when I was in Canada. I had rental property, and with rental property we have deductions, like there's yard maintenance and pool cleaning and things like that. So did up my income tax return, and this was my income. These were all my deductions that I was given from my property management company because it was out of country property. So great, no problem, file, fine. The next year, same thing, no problem, file, fine. Another year, I get a letter in the mail saying you're being audited. So I thought, okay, whatever. Like, I know that they do random audits, like no big deal. I wasn't concerned at all. And anyway, long story short, what the auditor said, he's like, well, we're going to accept your income, but we're not going to accept any of these deductions and expenses you have. So then they redid my taxes and then said, now you owe so much money. And because it was 2 years ago, you also owe us interest on that money. And I was shocked. Like I couldn't, because it was all legitimate stuff. Like I wasn't trying to do anything sketchy at all, because I was like, I don't want a tax problem. I've got income, I have deductions, I'll pay it. And then at that point I thought, okay, if that's the way the government's going to work, I'm going to learn some of these rules, and I'm going to learn to play within their rules. And then I really started to find out about international corporations, offshore bank accounts. And it's funny when people hear offshore corporations or offshore bank accounts, they think, oh, it's illegal. It's money laundering. You're the mafia. You're like, and it's not. It's just, if I can now have my corporation in a country where I pay no taxes or low taxes, if mine's in a no tax, I don't have to worry about deductions. And has anybody looked at a receipt that was printed off 2 or 3 years ago that the ink is gone? There's nothing left on that piece of paper. The government's going to say, oh yeah, you're right. That was your receipt. They're going to say, no, that's not proof. You owe us money. And that's kind of how I got started into looking more into doing international corporations and international investments as well.
Well, then you are probably the perfect example of this. Now, I'm going to assume something. I'm going to assume
Mhm.
something. I'm going to assume that you put your rental income on your Schedule E of your 1040. Is that true?
Ooh, we're going back about 12 or 13 years ago now.
Did you file? Okay, well then, did you file it? Did you file? Did you file? What is there an
I had it
entity
all on
that
my
you're?
personal taxes.
That's my question.
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
I had
Right
it. I
there,
had done
because
it all on my personal
there's
taxes.
the there is the perfect example. You are proving the rule. That the issue is, and that, the issue is, it sounds like your auditor was way out of line and misstated the law, and it sounded like, you had grounds to push back on them totally and put them in their place. But the reason why you were audited is this: you put that on a personal return. A Schedule E is something that an IRS examiner can understand. And that is the problem. They can understand that, and they don't understand they're not accountants. They're not necessarily accountants. So they don't know. And so you have someone who's trained, and they had their training module. Okay, if you see this, do this. And they don't really know how everything works. They're just given their training module, do this, do this. And so
Right.
that is how they're, and they just followed some training module inappropriately as well. And to do that. Now, the same income that comes in on a business return won't be audited,
Mm.
because, oh, it's hard now. There's a balance sheet. Oh, they don't know what that is. So that is actually, so what you're doing, by setting up your corporations, helping people set up corporations, you're lowering their audit risk.
You're right.
You're doing very good things. So I want to encourage you to do that, because that's absolutely right. It makes it too difficult. And it's just, and this is my, the top lesson I learned from doing all the disclosure work is the IRS wants naive victims that
Yes.
are the perfect size, enough for a press release, but not so much that they're going to come back with 20 lawyers and 30 accountants. So
Mm.
that is what the IRS is looking for, a sweet spot, and you need to get yourself out of there. And by diversifying, and by being, you're making yourself look very big and important.
Mm.
And I wouldn't want to, and this is the other thing too. Oh my God, there's so much about this. So this is a conversation that I had with a group manager. And actually, she was nearby. I won't say where. She
Mhm.
was very nearby, and I was talking to her. I said, so and this was, I think this was 6 years ago.
Okay.
I said, so how are your audits going? What, you guys busy? You guys busy? She goes, oh yeah, we're busy. It's like, yeah. I said, how's your staff? But yeah, we don't have the staff. Yeah, people just aren't working. And I said, well, you guys doing a lot of, are you guys doing a lot of, international returns? You do any of this? And she laughed, and she goes, yeah, no, about half my auditors just refuse to do anything internationally. And I said, well, why is that? She goes, because it's too hard. So,
Oh, and they just don't want to do anything that's hard or too
that's,
much work.
and I think the word or the phrase we're looking for is, you're trying to create a barrier to entry into your life.
Right.
Okay, you want to understand my life? Great, let's go over it, figure it out. No, thank you. We'll move on. And that's actually what they do. They actually move on to easier targets. And
Mhm.
schedule in a personal return is a much better target. It's a much better target than anything else. And so that's
Mm.
really by getting out, by not having things in your name and getting it out, diversifying all over the globe. That is a fantastic way to avoid the risk
Right.
of an examination. And they will do, and I think that what I would say is they will act completely illegal and in very cruel ways. One of their favorite targets, and I know this because unfortunately I have a lot of clients in this situation,
Mm.
is when you have someone elderly who
Okay.
has a few $1,000,000.
Mm.
And you're like, well, that's all the money they have. If they had a pension would actually be worth more. Like a lot of times, like, okay, great. You think it's all that money in the world because you're a government employee, but in the real
Right.
world, like, that's what they have, and that's their money, by the way. What they love to do is take someone in that situation and penalize them into the poorhouse. because they know that the person has, facing the challenges of age, of just being tired,
Right.
dementia setting in. And that's where they get their nastiest. And it's again and again and again. And our friends in New York, they're good at that. I won't say his name, but it's very obvious what they did. And and I had some choice words with them. What they're doing is utterly
So
insane.
bad.
Yeah, it's so, and they're just looking like, and their justification is like, look, we have some stats we got to get. We're assigned totally. Oh, totally.
Just because we have stats, we need to hit those
We
targets. So we'll
right.
we'll
We
go
need to hit
after
a
the most
targeted penalty.
vulnerable kind of
Right.
thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's who's paying the price. People who are in the least position to fight back. You'll find a really big difference between if the IRS is assessing someone who's younger versus
Hmm.
older. And it's a nationwide thing because the policy is set by the National FBAR penalty coordinator. So it's a national thing that they're doing. And then they brag about their penalties that they get. So that's the thing. And and in these cases,
Hmm.
simple things would have, and they also went to probably not the right attorneys who might have sold them down the river as well.
Oh,
Unfortunately, that's the other thing too. There's people who just look at you like, okay, you'll pay me money and I'll just going to hand you over to the IRS. And that's what happened too. And I was trying
oh,
to get her
that's
hired.
awful.
So I guess in the defense
Awful.
of my friends in New York, it was really the attorney before that came that gave him no choice. And that's kind of where he was like, hey, she's in, I can't get her out. And he did recognize the ridiculousness of it in all fairness. So that
Hmm.
was really the challenge, but there was no mercy. And there were things we could have done. Um,
Right.
so that's just sad. So that's the part that's really sad. And that's why you got to really think about protecting yourself all around. But I
Hmm.
would say it's
Hmm.
like, but protecting yourself doesn't mean, keeping all your eggs in one basket, right?
No, no, that diversifying is a way of protecting yourself because if things go wrong, within the United States, Canada, Germany, like wherever our listeners are, that the government can kind of go after what's in that country. It makes it a lot harder, and I'm not talking like we're doing like everything that I do is legal. So if you
Of
have a
course.
corporation in another country, it's legal. You still file your taxes, even in a no tax country, you still file because the government makes sure you're doing legal things. But you don't have to be worried about the auditing. You don't have to worry about somebody suing you just because they need to make money and they're just looking for people to sue who have a lot of assets or the government coming after you. I
Oh,
mean,
oh, oh.
there's so many things.
Okay. Another perfect example of this. Another perfect example. So when you own a foreign corporation, you don't
Hmm.
file a corporate return. You file a report of a shareholder's report of foreign ownership in a corporate return, even if you're 100% owner. The form is
Hmm.
Form 5471. I'm sure you're probably filing them of yourself. So your Form 5471. Now, this is the thing that we found out, and it was actually one of my attorneys who moved on to a different firm. He's now working for larger companies than the smaller clients that we had. We were representing individuals. So he called me up, and this was last year. He goes, Anthony, you're not going to believe this. I said, what's that, Robert? He goes, so we have a bunch of corporate clients who kind of pretty lackadaisical about getting their 5471s in. And they're under exam. And the examiner's like, yeah, whenever you get a chance, if you can get that in, we'd really appreciate that. And the reason why that's odd is because what Robert was used to was all the people who attached that 5471 to their individual return. The
Hmm.
treatment when it's on that 1040 is like, where is that? We're going to penalize you immediately. We're going to give you the continuation penalty. We're going to keep on. This is not substantially. They go all the way. The difference is night and day depending on what that form is attached to. And that's why, yeah, you really want to get things off. Anything, have your 1040 as simple as possible. We're like, oh, hey, look, okay, I didn't report some, small amounts, whatever that is.
Right.
That's your best thing. And get your complicated stuff onto business tax forms, and that's just the way to go for long
Mhm.
term health and well being.
Right, right. And I think though, too, what people don't also realize is with even just having corporations, whether they choose to do locally or internationally, when we think of taxes, different states in the US charge different taxes, different countries around the world charge different amounts. there's not just like, people will say, well, where's the best place to go? And I say, well, I don't know. Like, I need to know about your business. I need to know about what you want to do, right? Some people I've talked to, they want to stay within the States. And it's like, okay, well, great. Then you look at states that will do best for you. But also just as a point, especially with technology and where we're going, and a little bit of the scary part of AI, there's great things with AI, but there's some scary stuff with it too that we need to be concerned about, is identity theft. Right? If you have everything tied up in the country that you live in, your corporation, all of your bank accounts and things like that, if you get into a situation where somebody steals your identity, all of that stuff is tied up, and it could be hard to even just access your money. So having another bank account, if you're from the US, even just in Canada, or if you go down to Mexico, or you travel to Europe quite a bit, just having that additional bank account in another country can help you if something goes wrong. And if not, great, you have another bank account that you can use for your travels, to save up, to buy something, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that is fantastic advice from my experience of handling these things. What a great insurance policy. What that you're diversifying your risk. That's what we're taught, that's what we're taught. In finance portfolio, diversify that risk. It's free money. It's free, it really is when you do that. So why wouldn't you do that? And you could pay bills in the US from a Canadian bank account. Of course you can.
And
Yeah.
and sometimes with currency, it's great, because if like, I don't trade currency, but sometimes you're lucky that, oh, one currency drops, one goes up, great, my money's worth a little bit more as well. And lots of things, like so I'm in Canada, or come from Canada, so I have a Canadian bank account. I'm living in Europe, so I've got a couple European bank accounts in different countries, but I also have an account that's in US dollars, because 95%
There
of
you
the
go.
stuff that I buy online is in US dollars. And sometimes I get paid US dollars. So for me, to get paid in US dollars to go into my Canadian bank account, which then automatically gets changed into Canadian funds. And then if I buy something in US dollars, gets automatically changed back into US dollars. And then if I
Nice.
send it back so I'm losing money because I'm paying an exchange. And then if I return something that I bought, they return it at their return rate. So it still costs me money to return something as well, on top of both exchanges. And it's just a crazy loss of money. So
Yeah.
it's, if you're not in the US, there's online bank accounts that you can, so you can put money in, and I just think it's better, because
There is
they
also
fees you. There's so many fees for
Yeah, and there's
everything.
also oh no, that is you. There is but this is actually a U.S. bank account. There's the Federal Credit Union. I had him on my show. He's because one of the issues is sometimes the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act can make it difficult for certain people in certain areas to open up bank accounts.
Mm-hmm. It
Those are not usually Americans who are moving there. It's people who are already there, accidental Americans. Those are the kind of people that have problems. If you're an American
Right,
moving somewhere, full American, you usually don't have a problem.
right.
So don't be scared by that. But there's some weird things that happen. And again, I see those happen. What I love, and I think this is where where you see one of the things that happens is you're going looking at the world through the limitations of your own prism of your own investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you need to cleanse yourself of, and it can be really helpful. And here's just one example of something that made me rethink something totally. And so I'm divorced, but my ex-in-laws, we're like this because they're
Mm-hmm.
Hungarian. I don't know, Hungarian people and me, we just get along well. It's just something. I don't know what it is. They're great. They're wonderful people, and I love them. And they still have a house in Budapest. It was
Oh,
given to them. It was
nice.
given them to them by in a nice neighborhood. And I'm like, well, I said, you guys barely use it. I said, well, why did you sell it? The carrying costs are killing you, right? And then they said, no, there's no property taxes in Budapest. I said, oh, okay. Well, like, yeah, the neighbor just takes care of it. And hey, you want to go use it? I'm like, yeah, keep the house, keep the house, keep the house. So,
Yeah. And that's an important thing too, because so I've been in Canada for a few months helping out with my mom. She's been going through cancer treatment and things, and she's doing great.
awesome.
So I've got my place in Montenegro that just sits empty, and people are like, you must rent it, like, to help. And honestly, like, it's not a very big place. but my bills are, I bet with me not being there for what we would call like HOA fees, that what little bit of electricity of just a few things running, I think I'm probably at maybe 50 Canadian dollars a month to leave it empty. I'm like, to rent it, if I don't get a reasonable amount, somebody wrecks my couch, my leather couch, why would I have somebody in there? Like it's fine. And it is exactly the way it is. So if I'm leaving for a month, I'm leaving for 4 months. Like there isn't, I paid a tax when I purchased it. There is a small kind of like property tax, but it's so minor. I think it's 10 euro a month for my quote, like HOA type fees. Even my internet there, I have a SIM card that goes into this like little device, and I can connect 8 devices to it. So my phone, my internet, and like my computer, my everything. And I pay 15 euro a
There you
month
go.
for it. So that's like 20, probably about 20 bucks US for all of my internet for an entire month. And I'm on the internet all the time with my work. Yeah, it's nothing. So it's like, why I don't need to. If I do rent it,
See,
great, I can
and,
make
and
it.
I
But
think, and that is amazing. And that, I think one of the things holding, people back from thinking about that is just like, oh, I just don't need another, carrying cost, another, all these, these property taxes get, out of control. And, it's this silent partner that you're in business with that you just takes a bunch of your money, all the time, and you don't get a choice. And that's what can make, real estate that not so helpful in the US. And it's like, you got to take off those blinders that
yeah,
these property taxes are not what in the ownership cost, and that, I think a lot of people know that, the US internet's a little more pricey than where, around the world. I think a lot of people know that. I'm sure your audience knows that. But
hmm
that's another huge thing too, and I think that's a really like, hey, yeah, no, like, why for the property taxes alone diversify?
right, right. And it's interesting because I mean, the downfall is a lot of people listen to the media, and no offense to anybody who's in like mainstream news and things like that, but everything's always so negative. It's bad, bad, bad. Don't go to this country. Don't do
Right.
this. Don't. And I've been to 45 or 46 countries now. Like I travel a lot. I love it. There's fabulous people everywhere. And there's kind of some crappy people everywhere, even Canada. Like there's some not nice people here. Like we're not all nice. I'm glad the world thinks Canadians are so nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. But not all
Polite.
of
I
them.
don't know if you
Let's
say
be
nice, you say
honest.
polite.
I am. I'm the
No,
nice
you
one.
are
No,
nice. You are
but
nice.
I
No, no,
mean, but there's
absolutely.
like there is a whole world out there, and there's so many different opportunities because we're looking at the world, and if we look at statistics, a lot of populations are declining. Like birth rate of populations are declining. But with
Yeah. Yeah.
immigration, there's a lot of people moving, and how we can move easier. There's a lot of immigration from third world countries or second world countries that are moving to other second world countries or first world countries, or just within their own country migrating to cities. And farmland and stuff is there's less, but major cities and things or growing cities, there's so many opportunities, whether if people want to move just for a cheaper lifestyle, a more comfortable lifestyle, they want to just invest, they want to have investment property, that they want to be just hands off, or maybe they have a investment slash vacation property, depending upon their work. If they live 3 months in it and then they travel and go elsewhere and then they go back for 3 months. I mean, there's so many ways to do it, and there's just so many options in the world. It's crazy. There's so many options.
Absolutely. You're right about the negativity, right? Because how many, yeah, it's just constant. It's always easier to give a snippet of something that makes it look far worse than what it is.
Hmm.
And how many times we all call a friend, or you call your brother, wherever they are, hey, oh my God, what's going on there? It looks crazy. Like, no, that's over. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And that's where I get,
Yeah.
I get calls about, when there's a snowstorm somewhere, and oh my God, I looked at the news and it's devastating. It's like, it's a snowstorm, and it's just a snowstorm. That's all it
Yeah.
is. And that's kind of right. I think that's a good reminder, is like that the world is full of great people, right? It
Mm.
really, really is, and great opportunities. And I really appreciate your energy on this, because you're right. Yeah, right on.
It is because it it bothers me because with as much as I travel, there's so much goodness. Like it's the negativity or the negative people that seem to be the loudest, right? And so we hear so much of it. And I get it in a way that the news, they need to keep people interested, and it's easy to keep people interested when they're in fear, and it's easy to control people when they're scared. And so it's like, ooh, like, if I don't want to get into the whole COVID thing. Some people, there's so many different thoughts about it, but it is true. When people are worried and scared, they're easier to control. And,
I would agree
it's,
with you on that, very much so. I would really
um,
agree with you on that one. Yeah.
yeah, because if
And
we're not scared, we'll just do stuff. We'll be like, well, I'm not scared. I'm going to go do
and
this or try.
and it just sort of, what you say realizes makes me realize, how many people make financial decisions from that place of fear and
Yeah.
that place of terror.
Hmm.
And really, a place of anxiety avoidance as opposed to opportunity seeking.
Right.
Um, and that is probably the more crippling thing. How do you change the mindset? And I think probably the biggest thing keeping people from, seeing the world is the fear, and that fear keeps you in your little, no, I'm going to put this here. I'm going to do what they tell me to do.
Hmm. Because
And I would not advise that. I don't advise
exactly.
that.
And, if people want to look at investment wise, whether, you can look at stocks and you follow the numbers. Okay, the corporation's doing this or that, but there's always things that we don't know. There's things that are going on that we're not sure about, or we don't know behind closed doors, or sometimes numbers are fudged a little bit. So there's never 100% guarantee with that. Stocks go up and down all the time. It's the same thing with the real estate. You never know, but people need housing. We're always going to need that housing. There's always opportunities in different places, and it depends. What do you want? And if you're unsure, there's ways that you can buy something small, buy something inexpensive, just to kind of get your feet wet. Go to a country where you like to visit and use it as your, as I said, your vacation slash rental property, or just travel a bit. And on your travels, check out some real estate, talk to some people, ask about it. Like, talk to people. Really, that's a big thing. Is just get off your phones, get off your
Yep.
iPads, get off your computers, and just go out and talk to people. And there's so many opportunities in the world. And once you buy a place somewhere, then you get a bank account there. When you have a bank account, again, as we talked about, the bank account is good, but also then you can, depending upon the country, you may want to invest in the different corporations and stocks and things that they have in that country. But then again, there's another opportunity with that. So it's, opportunities are endless. Of course we have to be smart and do some homework on it, but there really is a lot around the world. And the world is very large in some ways, but so small in others.
It's all, it seems like, and I would say this also, the incredible tax benefits. And
Oh,
that's, and there's not a lot of opportunity for tax savings. If you're a wage earner, there's not a lot of things you can do. Real
no.
estate, it just opens up a whole world of understanding to you, that you're able to parlay your savings into more investments, and it just goes the right way when you're doing it like that. And
Mm,
just discovering something. And I would say this, I have some very successful clients, and a few of them will say, yeah, I had just one or two things hit, like, yeah, I had that property did really well, and that just put me over the edge. It was that one thing, and that stuff didn't work out, but that's the thing that
that's,
and that's generally what I hear.
yeah.
Oh, that
Mhm.
didn't, oh god, that's a disaster. But then I was like, oh, that one thing. And so by
But
placing your bets just sort of a little
mhm,
bit around, and making educated guesses, and it's so much fun too to learn,
right.
to remove the barriers that you had that you didn't realize you had, to remove
Mhm,
the thought blocks that kept you from doing something, to say, wait a second, they don't do this in this part of the world. And
right.
we're just a product of our programming and inertia, and that's not
Mhm.
freedom. That's not freedom.
No,
Huh.
no, it's a false sense. We're told it's freedom. We're told you have so much freedom, you have so much freedom, until we decide you don't. You have so much freedom until we say, oh, you owe us tax money because you didn't interpret it right, or no, we're going to say it's this way. Or you
Right.
have so
Yeah.
much freedom until we're going to lock you down, or you have so much freedom until if you don't get a vaccination, this is what's going to happen. You have, like the list goes on, and it's not a matter of what you believe. It's reality. You have freedom as long as you follow the government's rules. If you don't follow their rules, you don't have freedom.
Yeah, there you go. You perfectly stated, and that's exactly right. And I would say it's up to you to make your own
Yes.
freedom, and that's the thing.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
it's really because what they're saying, just in their mindset they're putting you in, is not where you're in a decision. Like, wait, I can't discern right because it's all confusing here, so I better do it this way. But when you see, it's like, oh wait, no, you're just saying that because you can, and you're taking advantage of people, and you're admitting to it now that I called you out on
Right.
it.
Right. And freedom to each person is different, right? Like people like their freedom can be different lifestyles. It could be working 3 days a week, or it could be, I love my job. I want to work all the time, but I want a month's vacation a year, or whatever anybody's individual ideal of freedom is. And I think like you're not stuck anywhere. So people ask me all the time because I move and I'm always looking at different places. And lots of times I've moved without ever being in the city. I've never been to the country, never been to the city, and I just moved there. And it's a little crazy. I don't recommend it for everybody, but it's usually just me by myself. So it would be different if I had a family and things like that. And so people are like, but well, what if you don't like it? I said, oh, then I just leave. Then I just pack my stuff and I leave. I go to another city or country or whatever. Like we're not stuck. Now, it is easier for some people to travel than others. And we do have to think about visas and residencies and things like that. So, but everything is doable. Everything is manageable. If there's a way, like it may be a bit of a process, it may take a bit of time, but we're never stuck in one country for most of us.
All right. You got a
Oh, are
great
you a little
attitude.
speechless there? Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, right on. And I mean, what a great mindset. That's really fantastic mindset to have, and to look at the world. And I'll be honest, I'm a little envious of you. I don't think I'm as positive as you, but I'm working on it then. Okay.
But you also see a lot of negative things through your work and bad things that happen. And so there's that, how it can be. So I don't think about it because I don't know. Like I've had one experience, I was like, oh, learning experience. But then I think that brought me to where I am. And there are some crappy things that happen on the way and some stuff that I'm going to have to deal with. But I really try to think, kind of this too shall pass, or what am I going to learn from it? Or, oh, ouch, that was an expensive mistake. I'll make sure not to do that one again. Right. And it's how we learn, and we just got to keep going because life is going to throw us curveballs. Life is there's going to be stuff that happen, and it's either going to take us down or momentarily just knock us down a little bit. But life continues. And so if it's something that's bad and we have to start all over, we still have our knowledge. We still have everything we know. And maybe that was something that's like, oh, that took the wind out of my sails and I have to start all over. But I still know everything I know. So it's not going to take me as long to build up and get back to where I was, because I don't have to learn all the things that I've learned up to this point.
That is a fantastic reminder, that do you really go back? We've all felt that, oh man, I've fallen behind. But
not really.
Not really. No, you really didn't. Yeah.
I mean, maybe you lost money financially. You may have lost your house, especially like 2008.
Sure.
And yeah, those knock you down. And your quote, we think we're starting over, but we already know so much that we're not really starting over.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Yeah, you're right. We really never do. And that, we never really have. And even though I would probably, if we were doing this Monday morning, I might disagree with you. Monday morning.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, we all have our moments. We all have mine. I have mine too.
Good Lord. There's no cure for Monday. That's yeah. Other than that,
So, Anthony, if people want to get in touch with you, like they're in a situation where maybe they're thinking about maybe relocating, or they've
Mhm.
relocated and they haven't been filing the documents and things that they have, or they're wanting to open up a corporation, they want to keep it in the United States, they're still a little nervous about maybe going international or overseas. Where is the best place for them to reach you or get in touch with you?
The easiest place would just be go to my website, irsmedic.com. And it got its name because my dad served in the Persian Gulf War in the 142nd Medical Clearing Company, and he was a medic. And when we started the practice, I said, "Yeah, Dad, we're going to help people, with tax emergencies." And I was looking, I'm like, and I was thinking, and I looked, and tax doctor was taken already. I'm like,
Okay.
oh man, what am I going to do? I'm like, all right, what's another word for doctor? And then I'm looking at my dad. I'm like, hold on, I got it. And I said, it's available. I said, Dad, IRS medic. He's like, all right, that's going to work. I'm like, well, until I get something better. So
And it's just stuck.
that's it's just stuck. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
the easiest place. So yeah, we started with we started with a lot of resolution work, but we've worked into really helping people avoid the problems that we've seen,
Mm.
and really firsthand. And I could say there is a lot of and I said, speaking of fear, there's so much fear mongering that does go on out there in the tax community, and that's sort of what the thing I was mentioning before with my friends in Manhattan who are fine, but it was really that other tax firm. They just like, you're going to go to jail and you're going to lose everything if you're going to do that. And I am sorry, but if an attorney is telling you that, how are you to know they're full of it? And you just
Mhm.
don't. You're gonna. And
Get
she was
another
like,
opinion.
get another opinion. Yeah. So just look out for that. And
Mhm.
sometimes sometimes there are stories that are like, okay, you might have bad news in a situation, but get another
Mhm.
opinion. And
Mhm.
and I just be aware of this, that I have a lot of friends who are tax attorneys, and I know a lot of them. It does attract a certain kind of person who, how would I put this? They didn't have opportunities in other areas.
Mhm.
And it's great for them because no one else wants to do it. And that's sort of the truth for me. No one else really wants to do tax. So it's wide open. There's plenty of room, because no one really wants to do it. So you get people who tend to be very uncreative
Mhm.
and will play it very safe. With that said, I have friends who are exceptional and just awesome, awesome, awesome. So that's where I would say, and I would say there's not as many awesome as there are the normal. So just keep looking
Right.
until you find an awesome, and you'll know because their passion for it really comes through, and that they won't judge you for not knowing something or doing something wrong. That's kind of how you're on the right path, I think. But there's definitely some really, really some fantastic ones out there for sure. So yeah.
Excellent. Great. And we'll make sure that the link for that is in our show notes below. So everybody can easily get in touch with you if they need to.
Right on. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your time. I know for sure the listeners got a lot of valuable information today, and I really appreciate your time.
I loved it. Thank you so much.